There is a massive storm raging in political circles and across the length and breadth of the country over what many people are proposing is a very imminent wealth redistribution policy that the Congress party is promising to bring in if it is voted to power. The Prime Minister has questioned it, saying that it aggrieves Hindus the most. Is he justified in saying this? Others are saying that wealth redistribution proposal, the cure is worse than the malady. It will not, in fact, remove inequity. Are they right? Can an idea that has failed in Soviet Union, Mao's China, Zimbabwe and Venezuela succeed here in India? Has Congress exhibited an anti-capital streak by talking about surveys to determine wealth? These are the questions we are going to look at today over the next 8 or 9 minutes. The Prime Minister's words, uttered in the swirling fog of a bruising political war, are not pretty in the least. And while by extension they also don't make for general repetition, they do prompt some very legitimate questions and therefore must be recalled. Painting an ominous picture in Rajasthan, addressing fawning admirers, the Prime Minister intoned. And I quote him, "This urban Naxal mindset, mothers and sisters, they will not even leave your Mangal Sutra. They can go to that level. The Congress manifesto says they will calculate gold with mothers and sisters, get information about it, and then distribute that property. They will distribute it to whom? Manmohan Singh's government had said Muslims have the first right on the country's assets, unquote." The outpouring shorn of political correctness has caused India's left to have an apoplectic fit. The Congress that the Prime Minister equated with displaying a, quote, urban Naxal mindset, unquote, has in the meantime pounded on the Election Commission's door, calling upon the panel to book the Prime Minister for, quote, hate speech, unquote, and for spewing, quote, inflammatory fake news, unquote. Now, viewers, while the Congress can build a case to accuse the Prime Minister of highly polarizing rhetoric, it may find it hard to prove in principle its charge that Modi and the BJP are spreading, quote, fake news, unquote. The Congress Party manifesto is implicit on its commitment to undertake some nature of wealth or income redistribution. Consider what the vision document says, quote, "Congress will conduct a nationwide socio-economic and caste census to enumerate the castes and subcastes and their socio-economic conditions. Based on the data, we will strengthen the agenda for affirmative action," unquote. It doesn't take rocket science to know that determining socio-economic status requires obtaining information on what income and assets entities, including individuals, own. It's implicit, it's logical. Then, a day after the Congress Party's manifesto was released, Rahul Gandhi in Hyderabad elaborates on this idea that is contained in the manifesto. Here is the Congress sign in his own words, quote, "We will conduct a financial and institutional survey to find out who holds the country's wealth, what section holds it, and then we will undertake revolutionary work. Whatever your right, we will work on giving you the same," unquote. There you go. Bingo. Rahul Gandhi is clearly talking about wealth redistribution, about playing virtuous Robin Hood, securing from the rich to give to the poor. Now, friends, this isn't bad by itself. But now that the Congress wealth redistribution ploy has been established beyond reasonable doubt, we must ask why the Congress is suddenly distancing itself from its implicitly articulated manifesto promise. What is the cause? The answer lies in what Prime Minister Modi somewhat injudiciously warned Hindus about. Remember, the Congress historically views Muslims as the most disadvantaged sections of the population. Former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh had himself said so very clearly in 2006. Sample his exact quote, and I quote him, "I believe our collective priorities are clear. Programs for the upliftment of SC, STs, other backward classes and minorities and women and children. The component plans for scheduled castes and scheduled tribes will need to be revitalized. We will have to devise innovative plans to ensure that minorities, particularly the Muslim minority, are empowered to share equitably in the fruits of development, full stop. They must have the first claim on resources," unquote. Now, applying Dr. Singh's logic to the Congress party's prospective, quote, wealth redistribution, unquote, policy, any future Congress administration will naturally prioritize Muslims in wealth redistribution. With the Prime Minister taking this element of the Congress policy to the voter, the grand old party has suddenly realized that it could potentially alienate the majority community. Quite obviously, it is now backpedaling furiously. Of course, it isn't just about Muslims being the first in line to benefit from prospective Congress wealth redistribution plans. They're deemed indigents. It's the Congress that has deemed them indigent, that is very poor or disadvantaged, could also exempt their assets and incomes, in short, their wealth, from being assessed and surveyed under any putative Congress government. To elaborate, if an institutional survey is to be conducted, as Rahul Gandhi has declared, religious institutions will also be included. It's only natural. Hindu temples hold huge assets, land and gold. Waqf board also administers huge tracts of land and mosques with valuable assets. But since the Congress regards Muslims as disadvantaged, will Waqf properties be exclusively exempted from the survey? If this is the case, then only Hindu religious institutions will be made to part with their wealth. This, as you know, is not without precedent. The state has enacted laws that currently allow it to administer Hindu religious bodies exclusively. The same law also allows the state to tax the income of these Hindu institutions. The institutions of no other religions are managed by the state. As wise legal minds never tire of pointing out, if there is a precedent, there is a way. So, in some ways, the Prime Minister is right that yes, any prospective wealth redistribution policy brought by the opposition, especially the Congress, might actually disadvantage Hindus. But what about wealth redistribution as a policy in itself? Is the cure worse than the malady? Now, we know the example of some countries, and I've already talked to you about those. Soviet Union, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, and Mao's China, and of course, friends, even India. Here, wealth redistribution has been happening for decades. At one time, the Congress also implicitly passed laws that forced all of us to give a percentage of our income to the state, not just income tax. This was something more, but they had to rescind it. Many subsidies are routinely given by all of us taxpayers to farmers. Some of them are very rich farmers earning much more than you or I. They are exempt even from paying taxes. But has that reduced in any way agricultural poverty or inequity or made the sector very productive? In fact, the Congress at one time was taxing us at above 90%. It didn't mean that poor were lifted miraculously out of poverty. By itself, giving from one to another, a richer to a poorer, sounds virtuous but doesn't quite work. And there are also many other challenges with wealth redistribution policy. Both income and assets will have to be surveyed, which will be a gigantic exercise requiring massive resources. survey to assess income presumably cannot differentiate between tax-paying and non-tax-paying citizens like rich farmers. Doing so would defeat the purpose. How can you exclude them? But to bring them in, there will be a pushback, there will be protest, there will be anger. It could lead to political anarchy, and we've seen some of those protests. All asset classes, land, gold, cash, property, will have to be assessed to determine wealth. Determining their existence and their value will be an almost impossible logistical task, and it could take years. Determining assets of institutions will require covering religious ones too, like temples that hold a large part of the national land bank. Once assessed, the state will have to redistribute this too, which could be a very fraught exercise. Hindu temples will say, why us? What about Waqf boards? What about other religious institutions? What about Parsis? They hold so much land. Ancestral wealth and assets will also have to be computed. Exercise will be left to surveyors and state reclamation agents, which could increase the potential for graft. Since income and wealth levels change, the exercise will have to be carried out periodically for it to remain equitable. Wealth or income redistribution exercises have failed in the past, have completely failed. Apart from stifling high tax rates, the Congress brought in the Compulsory Deposit Scheme Act in 1963 and 74, all scrapped. Think about it. Do your research. Let me know what you think of this podcast. Do you think it made a point? It made any sense? Thank you very much.